You're listening to episode 108 of Financial Confidence. Confidence, where we're helping you to make your money, keep your money, and grow your money so you can do those things that you're called to do. That's to build generational wealth and leave an inheritance for your children's children. I have only a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. Guys, that poem is anonymous, but I just wanted to give you a little reminder that you are a special individual. There's no one else on this world like you. You have the talents and abilities that direct and guide your destiny, and you create your future. Yes, we're having a futurist conversation today on financial confidence. So I want you to go get your pen and your paper so you can be ready for this courageous conversation, guys. But before we get there, our guiding principle for this show is Matthew 6:33. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. We also implore that you pray over your finances so you can do the things that you're called to do. If you will, bow with me. Lord, help us to value things in this world that are really valuable. That's our relationship with you, our lives, and our families. Help make us responsible stewards of your financial resources, and let us trust your holy word, the eternal glory. In our son Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Guys, we are excited to have a special guest in the podcasting studio today. She is USA Today's first Road Warrior of the Year. She's the business futurist and certified management consultant, Miss Joyce Joya. Joyce, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to be with you. Thank you so much, Lynn.
Well, thank you for joining us here at Financial Confidence. We're excited to have you in the podcasting studio, having this conversation with us today. So if you will, introduce yourself to our audience. Let us know a little bit more about you.
Oh, boy. Well, I was born and raised in New Orleans. Please don't hold that against me. It's a great place to be from. And the food is wonderful.
Absolutely.
I attended the University of Denver, and when I graduated from college at the age of 20, there were no jobs for women in Denver at that time. And the reason was that there were more people than there were jobs. And so the only job that I could get was working in an employment agency. And that's where I began my career in HR. But it was really sales and HR. And then from there, I ended up being recruited to New York to work for the world's largest manufacturer of bridal gowns, where I established for them what I used to call a boiler room, but it was really a telemarketing operation for a new division of theirs for headpieces and veils. And it didn't work because we were charging 15% more than everybody else was charging, because we had a proprietary product on the headpieces and veils called Snap-A-Veil. And what that did was it allowed the bridal consultant to try on a particular length of veil for the bride. And then if that didn't work, unsnap it and snap on another one. Well, that worked in theory, but not in practice. And so when that ended, and I chose to go work for one of their divisions, and I worked for their less expensive bridal division, Bridalore, until I married my first husband in one of their couture dresses. And shortly thereafter, I really had had enough of the garment industry, so I went to work in the invention development area. And what that did, and I was at that point at the ripe old age of, I think, 22 or 23, but I had a chance to see how innovation has an impact on business. And I fell in love with the leading edge of innovation. I'm going to fast forward now to 1971, and I was privileged to be in the right place at the right time. And I was recruited to work for for a new magazine startup called The Complete Buyer's Guide to Stereo Hi-Fi Equipment. I was asked to be sales manager of that, and I doubled advertising revenues for 5 years in a row. But after 3 years, I said to my boss, listen, I need the title of publisher in order to really make things work here. And he gave it to me. And so at the age of 28, I was one of the youngest magazine publishers in the world. Very exciting. And I've had stints in advertising. I worked for the direct marketing group. I had a chance to work in magazines. I was promotion director for Chocolatier magazine, and I worked a really good deal. And this is an interesting clue for some of our listeners today, Lynn, because what I did was I went to the company that owned the magazine, and I said to the president, I said, you need a director of promotion, and I need a place to work my consulting firm. And we agreed that I could work my business out of the 34th Street office, and I would do work for him. And he paid me a small amount of money every month. It was actually less than I'm getting for Social Security right now, but at the time it was reasonable. And I was able to build my business by having that safety net under me by working for him. And I was able to give him all that he needed, and I was able to give my clients what they needed and build those two things simultaneously. Well, I'm going to fast forward again. I became a futurist back when I was the publisher of the magazine, because I discovered that what endeared me to my advertisers was being able to tell them what was coming and why. And the people I was selling to were really the US presidents of Japanese companies. And they were just like sponges when it came to wanting to understand international finance and wanting to understand why the yen was doing what it was, and wanting to understand the psyches of their consumers. And I was able to give them insights into all of that. So that made me a very valuable person. And that's how I ended up doubling advertising revenues 5 years in a row.
Wow.
But it was also the beginning of my understanding of the groundwork for this new book that I just published, that I am publishing. Well, I've just published it in September. So clearly it will be out by the time this goes on air. And what I discovered was that I needed to take care of my clients by helping them to take care of their customers. And what I did was I gave their customers something that would be helpful in selling product, which was the biggest gift that you could give to a consumer electronics dealer. And what I gave them were pre-printed reviews that we were going to print 6 months later in our magazine, which helped the dealers sell that product on their floor. And the manufacturers loved it because it helped them sell product, and the dealers loved it because it helped them sell product, and I loved it because it helped me sell advertising.
Right, right.
So it was really a win-win.
Awesome.
But it was all about thinking about, as a small or medium-sized business owner, you want to think about what it is that your customers are looking for from you. How do you define a good experience for you? And that has guided all the work that I have done throughout my entire career.
I love it. I love it. Those are invaluable insights that you share. But you took us forward. I want to go backwards a little bit further back than where
I think
you
a
started.
lot further back, if I remember the question that you're going to ask me.
Yes, I want to ask you, what was your relationship like with money growing up as a child? Were there those conversations that, you were involved in the money conversations, or was it more of a child stay in a child's place? What was that relationship like in your early years?
Well, other than the fact that I had my first business when I was 14, because I wanted to have my own money, it was not very good. My mother instilled in us a belief system that there was never enough money. And that was really weird because she was the wife of a physician. And as such, she would go out and buy herself designer clothes. And yet we were always told that we had to conserve because there was never enough money. You can't equate those two. There's a cognitive dissonance. It just doesn't make any sense, does it? And so I grew up with not having a very good relationship with money. And it was only after I worked with my daughter, actually, who is, it used to be, not is anymore, but used to be kind of in the same business that you're in. Her name is Belinda Rosenblum, and she has a company called ownyourmoney.com, but she also has a new company called Cashflow CEO, and she's transitioning to help women entrepreneurs because that is her passion. But anyway, when it came back to me, I actually had credit card debt, a lot of it. And Belinda helped me with a program, which I'm sure you can help your listeners as well, with a program to help me get out of debt. And now I have been debt-free for many years, and it is so much less stressful, so much less stressful, truly.
Absolutely. Well, we can definitely appreciate that conversation. That's something we talk about all the time here. How do you get from under that credit card debt? Because there's always the persona or the look, right? We always have to look the part. You said your mom was married to the physician. As a wife of a physician, there's a certain way that people expect you to look. So I'm sure that we can relate to, or at least understand, right, the rationale behind the way she thought. But then in understanding that rationale, we also have to draw conclusions for ourselves in our own thinking, in our own emotional attachment to these things, and understand the why. What is the why behind the reasoning of making those purchases, of going into that credit card debt, of putting ourselves into these positions that are not most beneficial to us? But you said something I want to go back to. You said you started your first business when you were 14 years old
Yes.
because you wanted your own money. Love it. Tell us about that.
It was called Jack and Jill Parties for Children. I had worked for, I can't claim that I came up with the idea. I had worked for a company called Pied Piper Parties for Children. And the woman who ran that moved from New Orleans to New York. And when she moved, she told me she was shutting down the company, which made me very sad. And I didn't want to stop working, of course. But at the same time, she said, but you should do this. You should start your own company. I said, well, why don't you just give me Pied Piper? It has, you know, it has brand awareness. I didn't use those words, but I said,
Right.
people know about it. Why don't you just, no, I don't want to do that. Start your own. So then I had to hunt for a name that had both male and female, boys and girls, connotations to it. And that's how I came up with Jack and Jill Parties for Children. Because actually, there aren't a lot of other fairy tales that you could name a company after that have both boys and girls, right?
Right, except for Hansel and Gretel. And I don't know if you like the ending of that.
Very good one. And I starred in my 6th grade operetta. I was Gretel.
Awesome.
I go to sleep.
Right? Awesome. Thank you for sharing that memory with us. So when you started Jack and Jill Parties, what then did you do with your first paycheck? Did you invest that back into the business, or what did you do?
Well, I did. I actually was blessed to have an uncle who was in the printing business, so he made me some business cards. And I would hand out those business cards wherever one of my boyfriends accused me of being able to find new boyfriends because I'd hand out my business card.
Awesome.
But there were no publications at that time for mothers. There was no social media at that time for moms. And so it was just word of mouth. So I may have put an ad in the country club newsletter if there was one, but it was free. You know, there were no paid places to have to do it. So there was nothing to spend money on other than one thing. I had a party for all of my workers, my 4 or 5 workers, which was more like a business meeting, but I also taught them how to cut a cake because that was part of what they needed to know how to do. And I also taught them the tips and tactics that I used when I did birthday parties.
Good point, because that is a much needed skill, knowing how to cut the cake for the number of people who are present at the party. Trust me. Oh, yes, we go through that a lot with the kids' birthday party. So, yes, that's definitely a good skill that you shared there. So in switching gears just a little, you mentioned that you released a book. How did you come to write your book, Experience Rules? Yes,
I am a consultant. And I have a background in marketing, as you've already heard, marketing and sales. And in 1993, I met my soulmate and 3rd husband, Roger Herman. He became my 3rd husband anyway. And Roger had written, at the time, I think he had written something like 5 books by himself. And then we wrote 5 books together, and those were in the HR space. But what I realized was that I could bridge marketing and HR by looking at the marketing aspect of HR. And I developed a theory and framework for something that I call internal marketing, bonding with employees as valued customers.
Mm.
So, so then I was able to understand. Now, first I understood marketing, then I understood HR, and then I saw the bigger picture. And I wrote a book that never got published called Add Value or Die, which is true. If you're not adding value as a small or medium-sized business person, you're not going to be in business long because everybody else is. That's the smart way to do business.
Absolutely.
And as I progressed in my career, I began to see that there were consultants for the customer experience, and there were consultants for the employee experience, and there were consultants for the investor relations experience. And one day I had an aha moment when I saw the bigger picture of it. And I said, well, if it's important to deliver positive experiences for our customers and employees and investors, it's probably important to deliver positive experiences for all of the different stakeholder groups. And that's what led me to understand the value of pushing product to the bottom line by taking a more holistic approach to the way companies are run. There are actually two very successful companies in this country that are, one is, I think they're both multinational by this time, that are built on that premise of aligning all the messaging and advertising and branding for all of the different stakeholder groups. And those two companies are a company called Sedgwick, used to be called Sedgwick CMS, which stood for Claims Management Service, and another one called Silicon Labs, which happens to be headquartered here in Austin. And those two companies really get it. I've talked about them in my book somewhat, and I'm just very, very impressed by the way they're operating. The second to last thing I talk about in this book, and by the way, not only do I cover all the different stakeholder groups and how to establish great relationships and deliver positive experiences, but I also talk about gamification, simulation, AR, VR, AI, and all of those things and how they interface with experience. I also have 2 chapters on neuroscience. One is about colors, including senses. So I talk about taste, touch, smell, and kinesthetic. And I also talk about what the different colors mean to us, because colors do have meaning. And if we market with those in mind, we're going to do better. Finally, I talk about the rise, actually semi-finally, I talk about the rise of the CEXO, Chief Experience Officer. And that person's job, it will be to make sure that all of that messaging and branding and advertising is aligned so that there's not fighting between the 2 brands. So it actually blends, works together, there's synergy, it's all, everybody's singing from the same sheet of music, however you want to say it, it all works together. And then the last thing I talk about in my book is how to look at the journey for each of the different stakeholder groups, because we've heard of customer journeys and the importance of looking at that and the touch points along the way there. But nobody's talking about the employee journey. Nobody's talking about the investor relations journey. And I think that there is there are positive experiences to be delivered there. There's a potential there that's not being realized. And that's how I end the book, suggesting that going forward, that organizations actually do that work for each of their stakeholder groups.
Wow, that's truly powerful how you bring it all together, bridging the gaps. I love when you said that part, right? Bridging the gaps between each of the different stakeholders and what does that actually look like? So yeah, that is definitely powerful. So what does your book mean for the small and medium-sized business owner then?
Wow, well, a lot. In fact, I did a series of videos for a woman in Atlanta called Ruth King, and Ruth markets to HVAC organizations and contractors. Those are her two niche groups. And I talked about the value in their looking at what are the different experiences that they're delivering to their customers, to their employees, to their suppliers. Their suppliers are key, especially, and she gave me the example. She said, sometimes Freon is a very scarce resource. And I said, well, who do you think is going to get the Freon? Is it the small business that says to the supplier, you should be very happy that I'm doing business with you? Or is it the company, the HVAC company that says, thank you very much for being such a trusted resource for us. How can we partner better? And if you look at all of those different groups for that small and medium-sized, small or medium-sized business, and look at how you can deliver those positive experiences better, you're going to end up being more profitable. And you'll have more friends as well.
Awesome. Yes, as the saying goes, you know, you catch more flies with honey, right? The same thing as far as your business concepts are concerned. So as a futurist, I want to ask you, and switch gears a little, how soon do you think we'll be out of the woods with this infection?
Ouch. Well, not by September, really, because what's happening, and we are recording months before September for this thing. So I'm kind of going out on a limb here, given that this is going to be exposed in September. But what we're seeing in a lot of the states is that there is not a downward trend of the number of cases. In fact, it's flat, or in 25 of the states right now, it's growing. And it's growing on a very steep, like exponential line, curve. It's not even a curve. It's like a straight line up almost. And this is not politics, folks. This is science. This is health. This is a matter of your health. And honestly, right now, there are stores here in Austin, which I won't go into because they don't require people to wear masks. And although all of their people are masked, I have written about this as a futurist. I write the Herman Trend Alert, and my last week's Trend Alert, this was, well, in June, was about the value of wearing masks. And I talked about all the scientific studies, and I detailed a couple of them. And one of them definitively showed that the difference between both people wearing masks was 33% infection rate if the people who were infected were not masked, versus 17% infection rate if everybody was masked. But the most important thing is that that 17%, though they may have been infected, were infected at a much lower level, which means that the viral load that they had to carry was lower, and therefore they were not likely to get as sick. And that's very important. It seems that it's okay to have this infection as long as you don't have a really high viral load, or as long as you are not immune compromised. And if you're immune compromised, then you are likely to be in very rough shape with this infection.
Great points that you bring out and that you share. And I also think that it's important too that we're mindful. As we're looking at this, we're recording in June, we're also noticing that China in Beijing, they are going back to shut down now. They've closed their schools down again. They were wearing the mask. So different things are happening. So it behooves us to be aware, right? Always be diligent in doing what we know is right to protect not only ourselves, but others that are in our vicinity. So
we know that staying home works, Lynn. That's the bottom line, right?
Yes, and
I mean,
that's where I plan to be.
and by September, by the way, by September, we will, there are several aspects of this pandemic that we will be feeling more acutely. Sadly, I think unemployment will still be high. If you are looking for a job during a COVID compliant job during this pandemic, some friends of mine have written a series of 3 different books called 18 Jobs to help you cope with the COVID crisis. And I would highly recommend them. Their last names are Gaspar and Rossnick, Gaspar and Rossnack. And you can get that book on Kindle or Amazon. And I highly recommend, if anybody's looking for a job, that they consider doing that, getting it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those great resources. We're always looking for resources to share with the listening audience. One final question.
One more resource to share, if I may.
Okay.
The Herman Trend Alert goes out to, it is read by almost 30,000 people in 90 countries every week. I write it. And I have been focusing on delivering trusted information during this challenging time. This week's Trend Alert last week's was on masking. This week is the first one on vaccines. And it's longer than my typical Trend Alerts, and it still doesn't cover everything I wanted to say about vaccines. There's a lot to say. And we're not going to be out of this, sadly, we're not going to really be out of this until we either have a cure, a real cure, and that's not like a medication that works to help people who are in late stages, which is where we are with remdesivir and desmensivir, I think is what it is, which are the 2 drugs that they're looking at right now and saying they're okay. But once we have a vaccine, and it may take up to 3 years for a vaccine to be tested and in distribution, once we have a vaccine, we may be out of the woods. And the reason I say may be out of the woods is that, sadly, COVID-19 is an influenza. And in the past, our flu vaccines have been like 30%, sadly, 30% effective sometimes, because influenzas mutate. Now, do I expect to be taking this vaccine? Yes, I do, because I believe whatever I can do to protect myself from any percentage of getting sick by this particular bug, I'm going to do it. Now, you had a final question for me.
Yes, I do. And it is also related to COVID-19. But during this COVID pandemic, how will it affect us in the short term and then also address the long term for us.
Okay. In the short term, our kids are going to be home, many of them, although we are looking at how to restart the schools. I wrote about that as well. People can go to my archive, and you can go to hermantrendalert.com and click on the link that says archive and find that. When we restart education, we are either going to have to do an every other day system or a half day system. I personally, along with the teacher whom I interviewed to write that, are looking at a half day. And there are many other changes. For instance, the kids can't go to the cafeteria. We'll have to be doing box lunches. We'll be sending them home with lunches. We'll be giving them, they'll be having breakfast in a box lunch at their desks. There are many different things that will have to change as far as education is concerned if the kids are to go back to school. As far as work is concerned, many companies have discovered that they can operate very effectively. They're finding out what the software companies have known for a long time, and that is that they can operate very successfully by having remote workers. And so what we're going to see in the workplace is the kind of sharing that we'll see in the schools, which means that, and I'm suggesting that for workers, for employees, we'll do A days, B days, and even C days, depending on how close the cubicles or desks are. And if it's A days, then you'll have one person here, one person here, one person there, and there will be 6 feet between each of those people, at least. Meetings will continue to be either online or we'll have stand-up meetings in larger rooms. Or if you have a big enough room, we'll have designated seats in an auditorium where people can sit and have a meeting. But there will be some major changes in our workplaces as well. Now, a friend of mine named Ira Wolf came up with a really, really good term. And if there are companies here that have like more than 10 employees, then you're going to want to listen up to this. He calls it reboarding. And it's how you're going to bring people back into the workplace when it's time to do so. And that needs to be done in a very deliberate and safe way so that people not only are happy to be back at their desks, but they feel safe to be back at their desks.
Awesome, awesome. I love it. And we are having those conversations here, and I was listening in very intently. Guys, don't forget to sign up for the hermantrendalert.com. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
hermantrendalert.com. Okay, great. Make sure you go and get registered so that you can get that information in your inbox on a weekly basis, and make sure that you take action on the information that's shared with you. Any other closing thoughts you would like to share with us before we end the show?
Yes. Have faith. Things will get better. It may seem like it won't, but it will. And my best friend is God, because I know that he, she, all that is, has my best interest at heart. And though it may not seem like it, I know that everything happens for the best because I have seen it in action so many times in my life. So just know that prayer works, and keep a positive attitude because that is your best friend during this challenging time.
Yes. And I approve of that message, guys. Have faith and keep positive. We will win in the end. Guys, we thank you so much for tuning in to Financial Confidence, where we're helping you to make your money, keep your money, and grow your money. Miss Joya, before we go, where can the folks find you on social media, or if they want to work with you, how do they contact you?
Well, go to joycejoya.com, and there's a contact form there. It shows all the different kinds of things that I'm doing. I'm also starting to do some sales coaching in a few months on a new learning platform called Ngomu. And if they go to joycejoya.com, they can contact me, or they can take this down, Joyce, Joyce, at hermangroup.com will get to me instantly.
All right, guys. Well, you heard it here first. We thank you so much for tuning in for Financial Confidence. And we implore you to go and take action on the information that was shared today. There were so many great resources that you can use immediately. So don't wait. Go ahead, take that next step. Well, it's been a pleasure having you here with us today, Miss Joyce Joya. And we appreciate you for sharing your wisdom, knowledge, and expertise with us here on the platform.
Thank you, Lynn. It's really been a pleasure to be here with you.
Great, guys. Well, don't forget, we do want to hear your success stories. Go ahead and make sure you get those out and share those with us. I'm Lynn Demmons. That's Demmons. No demons here, y'all. Demmons. We thank you so much for tuning in to Financial Confidence on WYTV7, Christian Broadcasters Network. Until next week, you guys stay safe.